Hi, my name is Aiden, and I give my permission to have this video posted online as part of the Gender Stories project. I was assigned female at birth and identified as female until I was about 26 years old. It was then that I started to question my gender and struggle with internal feelings of dysphoria and insecurity with who I was. When I was 28, I dated a person who was not accepting of my androgynous gender presentation and often made remarks about how she wishes I would wear less boy clothes and dress quote-unquote girly for her. When we were in public together, I would often be perceived by strangers as male, to which she would reply by immediately correcting them and then emphasize to me that I am a female and that she couldn't be with me if I was trans and wanted to take testosterone or have any surgeries. As a result, I kept my true identity in secrecy, and I made sure not to express my desire to start my gender transition in front of her. After my girlfriend broke up with me, it finally allowed me the freedom to investigate and evaluate for myself who I really am without any shame, so I decided at around 29 years old that I was going to start identifying as male to my friends and go by the name Aiden. I still wasn't out to my family, or at the place where I worked as a legal assistant at a process service in my home state, New York. My job required me to be on the phone constantly in close proximity to others, and I was afraid to start hormone therapy because it would be impossible to hide the gradual changes in my voice that would take place during my gender transition. I knew the "I have a cold" excuse would only last for so long because it was obvious that there was something else going on, and that there would also be gradual physical changes that I couldn't hide. An aspect of gender that I often think about is gender expression. It's also important to emphasize that there is a distinction between gender identity and gender expression. I very much repressed a part of myself that I embrace now, and that is my femme identity. For a long time, I held a lot of internalized shame about my gender expression that I needed to examine. Before, I would sort of chastise myself when I was sitting on the subway, for example, and I crossed my legs. I'd say to myself, "What am I doing? Guys don't sit like that." And it was sort of like I was holding myself to these standards that I don't hold other folks to. Like, I don't look at other males and say, you need to do that, or you can't do that in order to be male, or you need to follow this narrative, you need to follow these rigid guidelines. But I was subscribing to these ridiculous expectations for myself. So there was this sort of dissonance that I had with myself, this contradiction. It was only when I came out as trans, only when I started presenting as male and started hormone therapy and started to look outwardly male, that I was able to honor my femness and my femme identity. And also to realize the hypocrisy that I had for those standards of femness, and I felt yucky about that I was having those gross standards of what it was to be male. Unfortunately, we live in a society where we often look at folks and make assumptions that certain gender expressions and expressions of femininity or masculinity are indicators of an individual's gender identity. I think especially being a trans-identified male, there are often these automatic assumptions of hypermasculinity. And I found it sometimes hard to find a place where my femme identity fits in, even with certain male-identified trans communities. However, what I feel that I've learned over time is to accept and appreciate about myself is that just because I'm femme-identified does not at all negate from my maleness.